your client asks you who to use for a landscape designer and you text them 3 names, you've already failed. You don't have a vendor list problem, you have a curation problem. Today we're going into the partnership engine, the thing I like to call local legends. And this is the play I think a lot of agents misunderstand at the most fundamental level. Most agents have a vendor list, a document with 20 contractors, 8 lenders, 2 photographers, handyman, stagers. Some are people they actually know. Some are people they met at a networking event back in 2019 and never spoke to them again. The list grew, but the challenge, nobody curated it. It's a database, not an actual referral network being the key. And I think that's the problem. And it's the difference between an agent who fades out of a client's life 2 years after closing and an agent who's still relevant 15 years later when that client is selling their second home and buying a third, or family's buying one, or something happens in their sphere and they reach out to that agent. Here's the move I want you to really think about. Stop building a vendor list, start building a curated directory. And that's why I have a name for it, right? The local legends directory. I think the curation is the asset, not the list itself. When a client asks who to use for landscape design, you don't text them the 3 options. You text them one person. I know. It's like, Tristan, why only one person? Won't you get in trouble? I want you to think about the process here. You're going to let them know, hey, here's the person that we last used, but here are 2 other ones if you want to take a look. There's a difference in how you send things and how you send this list. It's important to give people options, but it's also important to let them know your experience. The thing about this relationship that you have with your past clients and your personal contacts, they're going to you because they want a shortcut. You've already done this homework for them. Give them the option, but also give them the one that you just used that you were very impressed with, like a personal endorsement. And you've already let that person know to expect the call. It's a 2-way process, right? You've got past client or sphere that just requested this. And then once you send it, you've got this vendor. And the vendor who's on your local legends directory, you're saying, hey, look, I just sent your information over. And I also let them know that there are 2 other people, but I also let them know that I was very satisfied with your work. And now what starts happening is you start building this relationship that's really different because it's curated. First, the client gets the white glove experience that justifies your fee in the future. More importantly, it solidifies this relationship that you're just not another real estate agent, right? They got the answer they wanted while they're living in this home. And remember, people are staying in their homes for how much longer? 11, 12 years. In my area, it's 17 years. That's nuts. And they didn't have to do this research. They didn't have to go to ChatGPT and still read through the process because they don't know if ChatGPT is hallucinating, right? So you did it for them 5 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was, and you vetted that landscape designer personally. Second, the vendor who knows where the referral came from, I think, is just as important. Business to business referrals is key to our business. It means when their client mentions thinking about selling, buying, or anything, your name is probably the only one or at the top of their list. And this is the loop that you want. And it only works if the curation, right? This is the part, the curation is real. I get a lot of agents say, oh, like a big aha. Every vendor in your directory needs an actual relationship, not a business card in a drawer, not a name you met once, or not a list of people just on your website, right? A real, alive, current relationship. Sometimes that means having little events with them, calling them, making sure they're on an email list just with you, texting them, quarterly check-ins, coffee meetings. I don't care. Whatever this is, you've got to be able to connect with them and track the referrals in both directions. If you're not tracking which vendors actually reciprocate, then again, you're running a charity. Remember yesterday you were running a party? If these events are not producing any business, you're just doing a party. Some vendors send referrals back, some don't. The ones who don't, they're not bad people. They're just not partners. They go on a different list. The integrity of your directory is worth more than any individual relationship in and out. Now, don't get this wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't use amazing vendors. They're on my list. I'm always going to try for them to send me business because at the end of the day, my client, the homeowner, and those past clients in my sphere, they're the number one thing I'm looking out for. But it doesn't mean that I don't want reciprocation on this end. This is a whole big loop. Clients can tell within 1 or 2 recommendations whether your list is curated or padded. And I don't want them to feel like, oh, he just sent us another person on this list and it wasn't that good, right? I don't want any of that. And you can't fake that part. You have to be willing to fire vendors vendors who don't deliver. That's number one, even if they're nice people and even if they're giving you business. The directory is a service to your client. The moment a vendor underperforms, the directory loses credibility. You can't have that, which means you lose credibility, right? We don't emphasize enough because that's the piece we forget. If we lose that credibility, it's hard for us to gain that back. Here's another important part that agents, I don't know, have thought completely through, and it's the strategic core of this whole play. The categories that matter for market that you're in, luxury or not, there are different categories. I work in 3 markets here. We've got extreme luxury. Our entry level is about 800 to just a little over $1 million. And then we've got townhome, 400, 500,000, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, right? So all three of those, they're looking for different types of vendors on that list. And if you're operating at the high end, your directory needs interior designers, landscape architects, contractors, people who actually, number one, return calls, are reliable. Think of fine art consultants, estate liquidators, private wealth advisors, estate planning attorneys, which I use quite often, and concierge moving services. A lot of hands-on, extremely experienced that are going to provide the service that luxury world is looking for. Each of those is a category where your client is going to need someone within 12 months of buying or selling. Let's call it a volume market where things turn more. The categories shift a little bit. Handyman, painter, mortgage, inspectors, regular moving companies, cleaners, contractors. That's like more of what everybody else would need. Same principle though, don't confuse it. You need to make sure that you are curating this directory for any market. Doesn't matter which one you serve. And here's where the compound effect kicks in. Being the source of the right introduction is how you stay relevant in your client's life long after the transaction closes. The thing is, they'll share that contact and be like, oh, Tristan sent me that one. Real estate transactions happen in our market, like I said, every 11 on average. Like I said, it's 11 to 12. Most agents disappear during that gap. Can you imagine disappearing in a gap of 12 years, and then you wonder why your past clients used a different agent? It makes sense. Also, the agents who stay relevant aren't the ones just calling and saying, hey, just checking in on your home, sending a postcard here and there. And look, there's nothing wrong with that, but those don't always work the same when you're actually providing that value that they need. What's the actual value everyone needs? You need someone for landscape design. Well, call your agent. Estate planner, call the agent. You need a contractor who won't ghost you halfway through their remodel. That's pretty big. Call your agent. By the time the client's ready to sell again, guess what? They're calling you because they called you for everything else that had to do with the house because you had that list. And when you reached out, you had the list and you were just giving it to them and updating them and letting them know, hey, I just updated this. I removed 1. I added 3. You have anybody? Great. I'll add this person. Let me just verify them and see if they're any good. See who I can get that's reviewed them to make sure they're good. That's the curated part. When people that you're sending this to know that it's curated, they treat it differently. Now, there's one more thing worth saying about this whole thing. The directory is also your event or a partner. Think about events and partnering. Almost every curated dinner I talk about, whenever we talked about the small little events with the 8 to 14 people, right? That's the one. You can grab a vendor from this list as your vendor list starts growing. It was episode 4. Whatever this dinner is, also that topic of whatever you're talking about. If you bring in your interior designer, what are you going to talk about? Or if you bring in, I know this is weird, but if you bring in somebody, and I don't know what it's called, it's a wine sommelier. I'm terrible at this stuff, but you guys can talk about wine. Pretty cool, right? The directory and the events feed each other. Your partners get exposure, your highest quality clients, your clients get the value that this curated list gives them. And you sit in the middle. That's the cool part. You're the connector. That's not a marketing tactic. That's a structural advantage. That's the strategy. So here's your action today. Open your current vendor list. Be honest about it. For each name on it, ask yourself 2 questions. Have I personally used or vetted this person in the last 12 months? And if a client called this person right now based on my recommendation, would I be confident in the experience they get? If the answer to either of these questions is no, the name comes off the list. That's the audit. Or at least that's the beginning of the audit. By the end of this week, you should have a directory of names you'd actually stake your reputation on. That's the key. If that list ends up being 12 names instead of 50, that's a stronger directory list that you can start from. It's quality over quantity. Then pick 3 categories you're missing entirely and you start building this. Coffee meetings, reaching out to your past clients to see who they used, go through the whole review with them, right? Seeing if they fit, if they have somebody that can review them. Awesome. Add them to the directory. The directory is a long-term process. You build it out slowly, it's curated, and then it pays back so much over a long period of time. Anyway, tomorrow is the final episode of this 7-part series, the daily operating system that ties everything we've built together, the thing that turns 6 episodes of theory into a moat nobody in your market can replicate. I'm Tristan. This is your daily real estate. I'll talk to you tomorrow and share this with somebody you think may need it or may love it.